Now, I think this is a very weak argument, and I'm still surprised at the fact that so many professional economists simply endorse this, apparently without giving it a second thought. If this were really the case, and if banks not only could exploit the relative ignorance of their customers, but did exploit the relative ignorance of their customers and made their customers pay for wrong investment decisions, well, then they wouldn't have much of a clientele very quickly. And it's a miracle. I mean, then we have a new puzzle. How come that the banks for 150 years, after every single crisis, find new idiots investing into their institution, making deposits and buying their bonds and so on? This is simply, it's a miracle. So I think this is plainly contrary to common sense, and the actual answer and the solution to the riddle is different. The solution is simply that the customers, bank customers, and institutional financial firm customers, too, realize that the whole financial market is, so to say, assured as an inbuilt insurance by the central bank. So they too are prone to the same moral hazard, the same perverse temptation to incur excessive risks as the financial intermediaries. So there is a collusion between the financial intermediaries and their customers. It's not the financial intermediaries on the one side and the customers are the poor exploited customers on the other side. They all share the same interests and have the same moral hazard. And if we look at the empirical record, well, we must say that, well, they are speculating right. Each time there was a major financial problem, the central bank stepped in and did bail them out. So correct speculation. That, of course, has a cost. Right? It is not costless. It comes at the cost of a diminution, a reduction of the purchasing power of money. Right? Because a bailout means that the central bank produces more money than it would otherwise have produced. And as a consequence, money supply increases, so the purchasing power of money must decrease. Right? Prices start to rise. That's exactly what we observe right now in the US and in Europe, so everybody seems to be very surprised in the financial press. I'm amazed at this, right, that they can be surprised. And sometimes they report still about the problems in the financial industries and how central banks interact and so on. And there's a complete disconnect with the next reporting that goes on about the rising inflation rate. But clearly, I mean, if we have learned something from Friedman and others who have investigated the typical empirical concatenation of events, well, it's just that after 9 to 12 months, you get a significant rise in prices, and then it will even step up thereafter. So we are not at the end of our inflation, right? It will accelerate in the months to come, and it's the necessary result, not only the typical result, it's the necessary result precisely of central bank bailouts of the financial markets starting last August. So we can forget about the theory of information asymmetries when it comes to explaining financial market difficulties. It's entirely sufficient to stress the presence of our monetary system. Now let me stress the word system here. That is, the argument is not that our monetary policy is incompetent. Jean-Claude Trichet is just a bad economist or a bad central bank manager, and he should be replaced by somebody else. Or the argument could be that Professor Bernanke is a very bad economist, or very bad, in any case, a bad manager of the central bank, and should be replaced by somebody else. This would be a completely wrong inference. The problem is the system itself, it's not the persons. I think actually that the people who are currently running the system are very competent. Sometimes I do regret this, but I believe they are very competent and keep the system going much longer than it would be if others were at their place. So the problem, the systematic moral hazard generated by the system is truly generated by the system and cannot be imputed to individual failure. Now, having said this, let's look at how all of this relates to financial regulation. Is financial regulation or regulation of financial markets a proper response to these facts? First of all, let me stress a few more empirical facts. It's not the case that presently there is no financial regulation, okay, that we have no regulation of financial markets. And I say this because sometimes you get the impression, again, by reading the press, but also some of our colleagues, that markets are completely unfettered and it's a kind of a Wild West cowboy paradise in which financial firms can do just what they want, completely unrestrained. Well, that's not the case. Financial markets are among the most heavily regulated markets at present. And you cannot just set up any firm. Well, the question that I always ask in my class, in my university is, so how many of you know somebody who has already set up a company? I can ask the same question here. How many of you know a person who is an entrepreneur who has set up a company? Any takers? Okay, so I think most of us do. And the next question is, how many of you know somebody who has created a bank? Okay? And then, of course, the answer is obvious, right? I mean, we are all very surprised if we ever know somebody or meet somebody who has created a bank. I actually do know a few people who have created a bank, but, well, I'm a specialist. So, and this is because, well, there are very strong regulations determining the creation of banks. First of all, you need to have a minimum of capital. It's typically several millions of euros, several millions of dollars. Then you need to have an impeccable record. So if you have already broken a law, have lots of speeding tickets and so on, you're not a likely candidate to create a bank. And then you need to have professional experience. That is, you cannot be just an outsider coming into the industry, competing those who are in the place. You need to be one of the good old boys, right? Must have been an executive of a bank for many years in order to be allowed to set up a bank. And then, of course, the type of investments that you can make, the kind of financing for your investments and so on, is all regulated by law, and you need approval by regulating agencies. And of these regulating agencies, we have a plethora. So in the US, I believe there are 5 or 6 federal agencies. The Security and Exchange Commission is just the most well-known one. There are several others. And in each state, you have, again, state-level regulation agencies. And in Europe, the situation is very similar. So the regulation of financial markets is long-standing, very old. It is massive, and it is omnipresent. Then let us also mention that the government is present on financial markets not only as a regulator, but also as a customer. If you look at the actual figures of a financial market, typically, so you can divide between equity markets, bond markets, and then financial derivatives. Now, if we just look at the classical 2 segments, which are the equity markets and the bond markets, then typically the bond market is larger, and in developing countries, much, much larger than the equity market. And in the bond market, half at least, and sometimes it's 80% or 95% of the market consists in the sale and purchasing of government bonds. Okay? So the government, the state is already present not only as a regulator, but also as a customer. And this makes us, or should us make, feel comfortable about this idea that the same institution is now asked to solve a problem which apparently it has been unable to solve in decades past.